Good evening and welcome to everybody. This is the first video conference of the new season after the summer break. Tonight's presentation will be conducted by Arnd Bätzner from Switzerland and will deal about the role of the trolley bus in modern transit systems. Arnd Bätzner is a real authority in this field, as he is the Vice President of the Trolleybus Commission of the UITP, the International Union of Public Transports, that all of you know, of course. And he is a teacher at the Politecnico University in Zurich, Switzerland. I see that tonight there are people from many countries, 3 continents, and I'm glad for that. I'm glad that so many people continue to follow us in this series of video conferences. We hope to grow more and more in the next appointments. Well, before giving the floor to Mr. Bätzner, I remind you that you can use as usual, the chat in every moment in English or in Italian. And as usual, at the end of the presentation, there will be a space for any questions, both in English or in Italian. And so I think that now it's time to begin. So to start, so the word goes now to Mr. Arnd Bätzner. Please, Mr. Arnd Bätzner. Go on.
Well, good evening, Roberto. Thanks a lot for the very kind introduction. I'll just say 2-3 sentences of good evening, and then I'll switch back to English. Allora, buonasera a tutti. Mi chiamo Arnd Bätzner, sono un consulente per i trasporti urbani e faccio parte del Museo del Tram di Zurigo. Mi occupo principalmente di integrazione di sistemi, della mobilità condivisa e dell'elettrificazione di autobus. E questa sera voglio parlare del futuro del filobus, in particolare della tecnologia di in-motion charging. Tra gli argomenti che affronteremo ci sono alcuni dettagli teorici e tecnici, un confronto di mobilità di propulsione alternativi degli autobus e immagini di una nuova linea di filobus BRT di alta capacità a Shanghai in Cina. Allora passerò ora all'inglese poiché il mio italiano non è buono. Grazie a tutti ancora una volta. So before I start, one remark: there's lots of slides, so please consider this like a movie, and do not over focus on the details. It's more like a story to tell, and of course if there's questions also in the future, I will be available after the talk, so do not hesitate. And should I be speaking too fast, which is something that always happens, please slow me down and interrupt me and ask questions. So I'm not taking this just as an information. So this and now we'll start. Okay, let me start out with just a question. Just a moment. Just need to see. Well, here, yes. Let's first focus on the general aspect at the moment. This condition that public transport at the moment is a little bit kept within, which is on one side the necessity to serve high capacity access, and on the other hand, what we call demand responsive transportation, which is the whole issue of flexibilization, the whole discourse on autonomous vehicles and everything that goes with that. So let's very quickly first consider a few things. Let's take a standard bus, a 40-foot or 12-meter bus. Now, if people are talking about what you hear very frequently, that buses should be replaced in the future by some self-driving smaller units, some robo-taxis or autonomous vehicles, whatever you may call that. So there have been quite some trials with that, and there's a bit advocacy for people who say that in many cases the transit bus has basically seen its best days. Now, I disagree with that, because if we upgrade that bus from a 46 bus to a 60-foot bus, or an 18-meter, 75-meter articulated bus, then already we need a lot more vehicles kind of to supplement that. And if we go further, we need more and more vehicles. And now there are also people that want to tell us that we can substitute trains or subways and by autonomous or self-driving vehicles or Ubers. And we need more and more and more of them. And ultimately that won't work out. And there's something I think that is very important in the whole discourse, current discourse on public transportation. That is that streams of big vehicles cannot be replaced by streams of small vehicles. That can make sense in a rural setting, for example, or suburban settings where you've got infrequent services, but on everything that's medium to high capacity, this is not going to work out. So let's rather talk about bus upsizing. So of course, again, we have the 12-meter bus, we have the articulated bus, and we have the double articulated bus. So, and this is where it gets interesting. And now let's look at a few different energy efficiencies in a well-to-wheel consideration. If we talk about alternative bus propulsion, if we want to get away from the diesel bus, which is a global trend at the moment. And I'm aware that in Australia, I'm on the UITP newsletter for Australia and New Zealand, lots of things happen there. I've just been giving a conference on bus electrification for UITP 2 hours ago for the North American market. So, and in Europe, of course, we have the same thing. So there's lots of things going on. So let's look at a few alternative energy strategies. Let's start with the diesel bus. The strength of the diesel, as you all know, this is why we use hydrocarbon fuels in aviation, is the high energy density. So basically what you can do is you have a full day operation with no refueling necessary. Among the opportunities also is that you have the thermal energy that you can use, for example, for the cabin heating. On the weakness side, you've got the local pollution, especially the NOx and the noise. You've got no possibility or little possibility at present to do recuperation of kinetic energy. And you've got, and that's maybe the most important point, we all know that you've got the basic inefficiency of the thermic engine, especially if you consider an internal combustion engine and you compare it to an electric motor. Not only have you the electric motor is much simpler in its construction, but it's much more, it's by their dimensions more efficient. And then again, on the diesel bus also, you've got the pollution and you've got the risks that come from the fuel price and from basically geopolitics, given the countries that most of the fossil fuel comes from. Now let's look at, as the first alternative, let's consider the battery electric bus. So let's put batteries in this bus and let's see how that works. I call it the BEB, which is the battery electric bus or the battery only bus. And what I mean here is basically a bus that gets recharged overnight in the depot and then goes out to do its work. So among the strengths, you've got that there's no local pollution. You can already do some form of regenerative braking. And as I said before, a big plus certainly is the efficiency of the electric engine. Now, among the opportunities, and this is what gets done a lot at the moment, depot chargers are quite quick to implement. So if you decide to convert your fleet from diesel to electricity, depot chargers are mostly the most easy things to do, because as long as you can have a huge energy supply of electric energy to your depot to charge them at night. So that's what I call a low infrastructure approach. But again, there are some weaknesses also. You've got the battery weight. So the big problem with battery only buses is that you've got 4 or 5 tons of battery, or even more for articulated buses. And that if you put it a little bit you accentuate it a little bit, basically you can choose between the batteries or the passengers or the load versus the range. So carrying along 4 or 5 tons of batteries already seriously limits the potential of what you can do with that vehicle. And then, of course, you've got very limited range, and you've got the sourcing and the lifetime of the batteries. I made the remark previously for the fossil fuels, but the same goes for the batteries even more. Some of the rare earth, especially that you use for a very advanced battery construction, comes from countries that, let's put it this way, are anything but unproblematic. So among the threats, it's very difficult if on top of using the battery power for driving, you have to heat or cool, air condition the vehicle. You've got, if you recharge those buses at night all at the same time, you've got an enormous drain on the electric power grid with no counter stabilization. So you've got all the power demand at night as a power surge at the very rare moment. And it's also a systemic risk of charging, as some of our colleagues found out, or when there were fires in the depot, because in the past 2 years, because, for example, it's still the investigation under progress, but there was a theory that the equilibrium and the isolation of the electric system for charging those buses was not adapted to the full power that it had to convey. Let's move next among the alternative energies. Let's look at the hydrogen fuel cell bus, which is another technology, which among the strengths, again, there's no local pollution. Basically, what comes out of the vehicle is mostly water. It has the same range as the diesel bus and can benefit from the efficiency of the electric engine. Also there, once you've got your hydrogen fuel station, it's very quick to implement. So that can also be considered as a form of a low infrastructure approach. And you've got a comparably light vehicle, and you can make it basically unlimited availability if it's produced in a regenerative way. But this is one of the big problems. And I'm moving over to the threats. Basically, the production of hydrogen is something that is, in most cases, very inefficient. Even if you use green energy, so solar energy or wind energy for it, always the question is raised: why don't you do anything else with that energy? So hydrogen certainly has a lot of properties. For example, I see a lot of future for hydrogen in aviation. Personally, I consider it still more appropriate for bus propulsion, for example, on rural lines with low service frequencies, than battery-only buses, because the vehicles are much lighter and you need less weight. And then, of course, you've among the threats also, you have the problem that hydrogen, as you all know, if there's an accident, you don't want to be all too close to that, or also there's a risk of terrorism or something like that. So hydrogen with the 350 bars that you need in the vehicle reservoirs and also for the fuel refueling stations, that can be quite risky if your management and your manipulation of hydrogen is not up to your standards. Let's move on. Another alternative energy technology for bus propulsion, the so-called opportunity charging or flash charging bus. So I'll take the example, a Swiss development made in Geneva. I was born and raised in Geneva, so that is very close for me. They call it the TOSA, which basically is sort of from the name a trolley bus without wires. It's a Swiss development with Azea Brown-Boveri, ABB, Secheron, which is a Geneva-based an electrotechnical company, and universities, and which basically at every third or fourth stop you've got a flash charge, and it takes 60 to 80 seconds to recharge the vehicle, and then it has you see a very light battery unit on the rooftop, and that allows it to continue its way. This technology exists both with superchargers and with supercaps and with batteries. Supercaps have, of course, the big advantage of being even lighter than batteries and having basically being a low maintenance technology, but in their storage of energy are still limited, and also can be a little bit dangerous to manipulate if you don't do it in the proper way. So let's look at the SWOT diagram for the opportunity chargers. The strengths, again, no local pollution. It can brake regeneratively. There's the efficiency of the electric engine, and it's a very light vehicle that can basically run 21 plus hours a day if you let it. It's already going towards an intermediate capacity mode. This is this thing that we always need in transit. Low capacity is something that we can do very well with buses. High capacity is metros and trains, and intermediate capacity is always where there's a lot of, you know, that historically a need for solution. It's a light vehicle. It has a good weight for passenger ratio, and it can, since the en route stations are there for recharging, even air conditioning can be done, but can get tricky if it's really warm. So in a moderate climate, that works well. The weaknesses, certainly the charging times at stops, it can well also take 2 minutes instead of 1. If you have a lot of those buses, more than 1 or 2 routes, and they overlap in certain segments, you need to coordinate the slots for charging. If not, the vehicles have to queue and have the danger of running out of, you know, if the air condition is running, for example, and the charger is occupied and another vehicle queues up behind, there's the problem with that the vehicle runs out of battery. So you need to coordinate the charging time slots, and you've also got limited hill climbing capacity due to the sheer fact that the energy is not unlimited on board the vehicle. So also for the feeder stations, these charging stations, they tend to be quite massive. I've looked at a couple of them, and you need a very strong energy feed for those. So it's quite an investment to build these stations. You need to have the permits. People don't like them next to their doors because it's really, it's really a high power thing. And then, of course, also locally, you've got a drain on the electric power grid with no counter stabilization there. And now let's look at what we'll be talking on tonight, basically, which is the in-motion charging bus, which is basically the trolley bus 2.0 or the trolley bus reloaded, or the in-motion charging trolley bus, IMC. So the strengths here is, again, no local pollution. You can not only do regenerative braking, but you can now, with the latest generation, even put the power back into the power lines, which makes that you can calibrate and steer the power in the grid. You've got excellent hill climbing, basically unlimited hill climbing capacities. That is really a tool that is very suited to difficult terrain, to hills and mountains. It's a very light vehicle compared to battery electric buses because it only needs a small battery that allows it to run like 20-25 kilometers off wire, and then it can recharge immediately. So that basically can run not only 21 plus hours a day, but it can basically turn 24 hours, you know, if you get it cleaned, because the refueling is really not a problem. So it's a high capacity to super high capacity mode. The modern trolley buses, as we will see later, need the wires only on the core sections. So only on the big lines, that's where you need the wires, and you get down to 30% of the route length where only you need the wires. You don't need any switches or crossings anymore. So that what people don't like about the trolley bus, sometimes if in crossroads you've got these, or in urban squares, you've got these spider webs, as they call it, that is all gone. You don't need that anymore, which has also the advantage of bringing down maintenance costs, not only building costs for the overhead wire system, but maintenance costs, and visually, it is a lot less intrusive. And then, as I said before, these vehicles in the latest generation can actively stabilize your power grid, which will become a huge issue if we convert all private cars also to electricity. So having a counterbalance to night charging is something that will be very, very important, and also intraday. You probably know, if you've got friends in the energy sector, that in Europe, we have a couple of occasions per year now already where the power grids are so unstable that on a European level, they are very close to a collapse. So really, some engineers need to do very good work to stabilize them. And that is a problem that we will see much more frequently in the future. To get back to the IMC bus, it is excellent in his holistic energy assessment, because you don't have to do any chemical process. You can supply the energy to the vehicle directly from externally without chemical transformations back and forth, which of course, as we all know from physics classes, energy gets transformed, and energy doesn't get lost, but gets transformed into thermal energy or other things you don't want on every transformation. So the less energy transformation you have, the more efficient you are. Among the weaknesses of the IMC bus, of course, you need an infrastructure. You need some form of upfront wiring. You need to maintain that wiring. And at present also, because it's a limited market, it's a global market, but the limited market, there are not so many producers in the segment. So the vehicle prices tend to be higher for the moment. It can change when China starts to export their trolley buses on a larger scale, and that probably will bring costs out. Among the threats, it's perceived as a little bit unfancy. People say that's something old. Yes, it's a technology that's 80 or 90 years old, but it's a technology like the railways that is constantly updated, and today is one of the most advanced things out there. So we need to give it a little bit of a new branding and a new image. And then, of course, there's the political exposure. I observe a very worrying trend in transportation at this moment due to the political feasibility. There's this tendency to promise everything in an infrastructure light or no infrastructure way, down to the fact that in Melbourne, Australia, very recently, somebody was suggesting to buy trackless trams in China. And as you probably all know, trackless trams are something that combines not assets, but disadvantages of modes, and has failed more or less epically everywhere in the world where you have trialed these things. There is no transportation without infrastructure. Trams and trains need tracks, and electric buses that are performant, if they're medium or high capacity, probably need either flash chargers or wires in the future. So we need to all work towards getting that out into politics. There is no transport without infrastructure. That's something, I think, a very important thing to tell. Now, I'm not going to go into detail here. We did some UITP as a standard cycle to assess the performance of buses, and you see that when you see the power consumption, what you need, and the energy consumption for this 12.6 kilometer course, 19-hour daily operations with 300 kilometers of daily mileage, which is the standard UITP cycle in yellow. You see that, of course, the diesel bus consumes about 3 to 4 times as much energy as the electric buses due to its low engine efficiency. And the battery electric bus is already much better, but requires between 4 and 6 tons of battery, which, if you do articulated or even double articulated buses, is not really performance. And you can lower that, and that is a very conservative approach for the in-motion charger, even by 20 or 25% more. So it's really very efficient. And now what I did here, this is work in progress, so bear with me. I tried to sketch to illustrate that the frequency of service, which you have on the x-axis in the section of the street towards the topographic profile of the route, because every bus system is different. So with the end of the diesel bus, you need to really look what your system and what your network is like. There is no more one-size-fits-all solution. With the end of the diesel bus, you need to really assess very carefully which alternative technology is good for you. And if we see, for example, the battery electric bus is very good, as I said before, for flat terrain and the low frequency applications. Then we've got the fuel cell bus, which performs best in demanding terrain and also low to maybe medium frequency applications. We've got the opportunity charger that is a little bit in the middle, so it goes for all terrains and also rather intermediate frequencies. We've got the in-motion charger that is for all terrains and very suited to, especially to hilly and difficult terrains, and for medium to high frequencies. So that's basically a graphical recap of the analysis that we conducted before. So now, if you electrify your bus, of course, you can, as we said, you can put batteries in your bus, or you can put a trolley pole on top of it, as is the traditional way to electrify it, or you can merge those two things, which is the charm of the in-motion charging bus. And the Toronto Star, the Canadian newspaper, last year called the in-motion charging trolley bus the new climate superhero, because it's a medium to high capacity tool. It's zero emission. It is comparably low weight, so even more energy efficient. It actively balances the power grid, as I said, and it needs no more wires in places where they are delicate, for example, in historic city centers, or where it would be technically challenging, as in big crossroads, to put them. The latest generation runs off-grid 20 to 30 kilometers even on a very small battery that weighs about a ton. And so it blends basically fixed route, demand responsive applications, because it can, for example, in evenings, it can flexibly be routed off its normal path and it's extremely efficient per passenger carried. You probably are all aware of the Swiss trolley vehicle generation that was developed in Switzerland. What you see on the low end of the page is the Swiss Trolley 1 from 1991, of which the last series, actually the last vehicles, were just retired from service in Switzerland very recently, which basically gives them a lifetime of 25 to 30 years. That was already full low floor. And today what you see on the top is the Swiss Trolley 6th generation, which is also called Swiss Trolley Plus, that was developed from 2018 on, and in a coordinated effort between the industry, the federal schools, it was the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, and some universities of applied science, and the Federal Office for Energy as a government body. So this is a very Swiss way to do it. You know, everybody contributes, and it's basically a product of the civil society, which is very, very nice, because it's the private sector, the public sector, and the government administration that have collaborated to do it. The Swiss Trolley 1 on the left already had still had a thermic engine, so it was, I think, a Volkswagen Golf engine as an emergency mode, and it had overhead wire only. Later, some of them were converted already to an early stage of IMC, and the Swiss Trolley Plus, which is the 6th generation, can travel 10 kilometers and in total up to 60% of distance without wires, with passengers and air conditioning running. And if it's empty, it can travel up to 35 kilometers, for example, if it needs to go to a depot, so no more wiring, just to take the buses into and out of service. As I said, it actively stabilizes the electrical network. It has a GPS connection, a data channel connection over the mobile phone network, and learns the actual status of the power grid. And also it learns the topography of the route it serves. So it can decide by a smart algorithm and by artificial intelligence, it can learn when to put power back into the wires and when to draw power from the wires, and uses its small battery also as a buffer. Plus it can break into the battery. Probably those of you that have a strong electrotechnic background, you knew that in a 600 or 700 volt catenary, you don't want too many power surges in there, because that can easily destabilize your system. So this vehicle can break into the battery and then put the power back to the network later, and it can do that with a self-learning algorithm. And again, on top of the previous generation, which was the Swiss Trolley 5, it consumes again 15% of energy less, and this is already comparing trolleybuses to trolleybuses. So it's an extremely, extremely, extremely powerful and sustainable and ecologic bus. Also consider the lifetime. A very big problem that we're having with battery-only buses, with those depot chargers, is that the rigid structure of the vehicle in very many cases was not calculated to hold these very heavy batteries. And for example, in the United States, Philadelphia now has a problem with the Proterra buses that they bought 3 or 4 years ago. They've got cracks all over the buses, so they had to retire them from service at just 4 years. They were just 4 years old. So that is the kind of things that we will see, probably, unfortunately. I don't wish that to happen, but it will probably happen. We will see that in quite some other circumstances and environments. This was a prototype vehicle, the Swiss Trolley 6 and the Swiss Trolley Plus. It's made of a very light aluminum body. It's got a roof-mounted 1-ton battery, and has 360 kilowatts of maximum charging and 80 to 100 kilowatts in discharging power. It has a galvanic separator after the DC, which is after the DC-DC converter. So you don't need to have a double installation of vehicle components, which is a great advantage compared to traditional trolley buses, because it's cheaper and lighter to build. It has a capacity, and I'm talking about the single articulated version, it has a capacity of 163 passengers, is heated and cooled by 2 water-air heat pumps. So for both the passenger cabin and the battery compartment, you're probably aware that batteries need cooling and heating. They don't like extreme cold and extreme power, which is okay if you have a very light battery as here, but can be, again, a big problem if you've got a battery-only bus with 4 or 6 tons of batteries. The Swiss Trolley Plus has a synchronous motor and a higher couple lower route per minute drivetrain, which results in less energy consumption. Here is a picture of the roof. So what you see in the foreground is the battery. This photo was made here in Zurich with the VBZ a municipal operator that were very much involved in developing this trial vehicle, and also they have now the first series of these buses that run here. As I said, it has a self-optimizing learning energy management system, can learn the route characteristics, the topography, the stop locations. It can even understand how many passengers are loaded in a specific section at a certain time per day and adapt its speed, etc. So it's really everything which you can do in sort of smart applications. This thing can do it, including lifetime maximization of the batteries by steering the charging and powering behavior accordingly. So that was the result of a 3 to 4 year research effort, as I said before, which was coordinated between multiple organisms. And we are very proud to have this thing. As an illustration, I find that picture quite nice. On the top in the orange cycles, you've got the state of the battery. So the battery power, the charging and the discharging with the regenerative braking cycles and the driving in battery mode. What you see below the dotted line is you see the state of the battery, and you see the middle section is a section without wire, where basically the driving energy and the powering energy for the vehicle is taken from the batteries, and then again you recharge it to the wire after that section, and then it recharges itself again on the overhead wires and the catenary lines. So what you can do with this, if you have your classic, imagine you have a classic trolleybus network, as many cities have, that could look like this. Imagine that these are the main corridors where you have your wires in place. So the yellow things are where you have the overhead wires. But now you've got destinations, maybe that today you have to serve by battery electric buses or by diesel buses, traditionally, which are the blue points. And up to now, you could only do, the trolley buses could only run on the yellow lines, and you needed other buses to serve the blue spots. So what you can do now with the in-motion charging, you can have a trolley bus extend its way, and you can have both the red spots, which are new, and the blue spots, which are traditional. You can serve them as extensions of the classical trolley bus wires. So you keep the wires on the main axis, and your trolley buses, your IMC trolley buses, run beyond. They go to the terminus, they go back, and they recharge under the wire without having heavy batteries. So that is really a flexibilization. It gives you lots of opportunities. And even you could imagine some dynamic service, for example, at nighttime, you could have different routes. You could even, as I said before, imagine on-demand transportation, where a bus chooses its route on the end sections, depending on where the passengers go in the future, if you can control all that via apps. So that really allows for a wealth of possibilities to develop. Now I'll get you some slides. I get the permission to do that, of some professional training, which was very expensive if you hire it from UITP. I'll go through that very quickly, that I did with my colleague Eric Lenz, who's from Kiepe Electric, one of the main manufacturers. And I'll quickly walk you through those slides also, because they are quite complementary to what I just told. What you see here is a picture from Linz in Austria, and you see that there's these double articulated trolley buses, which are in-motion chargers that cross the bridge without wires. And there are wires on both ends of the river, but not on the bridge, since it was very expensive to put them there. So it's no problem, they can cross the bridge without wires, with full air conditioning and heating on. And you see that these are really massive vehicles. This is a little bit something I'll jump. Let's look at the current state of the art of the trolley bus systems. I mean, when we last counted them a couple of months ago, we counted 277 trolley bus systems in the world, of which 50 already actively use in-motion charging. So you've got, of course, in Russia and in Central Asia, you've got 83 systems plus 8. You've got 43 alone in Ukraine. You've got 6 still surviving in North America, and all those that survive today will probably keep them and upgrade them. We've got 2 systems in Mexico. We've got 7 systems in Latin America, 1 system in Africa, 3 in the Middle East, among 1 in Riyadh on a university campus, and 34 systems in Asia, in North Korea, but also in China. And China massively investing in new lines, and 2 systems in Japan, which are both, I think, in tunnels, if I'm not totally mistaken. So it's quite, it's quite a global market, and it's quite big, and so it's very important to kind of keep this market and use these chances for this technology to grow further. That was a little bit of a joke we made. Let me again cite the 4 reasons. The picture that you have there is from San Francisco, of course. The 4 reasons why the trolley buses will survive the diesel bus. The first, I mentioned it, and San Francisco, of course, on the right in the picture is a very good example. You've got the ease of handling gradients, so basically the capacity to climb hills. The second main reason is the outstanding overall sustainability. As I mentioned before, it's an extremely high energy efficiency that you have, and a very long lifetime of the components, both the infrastructures and the vehicles. So again, as in Switzerland, we've got trolley buses that live up to 30 years in revenue service, not in museums. And then it is if we talk about in-motion charging, it is a very efficient infrastructure development when bundling lines. For example, I'll come to that later. If you have a high demand corridor or a natural stretch of settlement, for example, you have a valley where all the bus lines have to go through, that is where you want to put your wires, because those wires can be used basically by a bus every 10 seconds. And you can use them continuously. You don't have the problem as with the flash chargers where you have to wait for the charger to be available, or you have to build several chargers one in a row, which is also not really efficient. And then some very interesting data, which was also, I learned that a couple of weeks ago from my colleagues at Keeper Electric. They measured that on sections where you've got trolleybus operation mixed with diesel buses, so basically, for example, 2 trolleybus lines and 2 diesel bus lines, people tend to choose the trolleybus over the diesel bus if they have the choice, because of the comfort of the ride. It's calmer, it accelerates better. So people like these vehicles. They get along very well with passengers, as, by the way, is valid for all electric buses. So the renaissance of the trolley buses in many worldwide cities is due to this new in-motion charging technology. So here we've got a video that basically shows, I mean, the animation doesn't work now, but it can basically show how you can take the power from the grid and then take it back into the grid. And then here in a symbol, you see on the upper left corner, you see that the bus comes under wire. The wire stops. You can, for example, serve a city center without wires. And then at the next stop where you leave the area where you have no wires, during the passenger change, the poles go up automatically, and then the vehicle continues its route. On the right hand of the picture in the middle is also something very interesting. You see this big blue box, which is supposed to be a flash charger, and you see the trolley bus charging there. And now this is very interesting. I said before that with the end of the diesel bus, it's no more one size fits all. But what is very interesting is that the trolley bus, the in-motion charging trolley bus, can very well be combined with the 2 other electric bus technologies. For example, you can use a flash charger that you have for your opportunity charging buses. You can also recharge the trolley buses. It's, for example, done in Solingen at a very remote location, which it would be a little bit too far for the ocean charging buses to run without wire. At the terminus, you have an opportunity charger that is also used for opportunity charging buses. The trolley bus can reload itself in 2 minutes and then it can continue. So you get the idea. You can really combine these technologies with each other. And if you already have a rail infrastructure, because, for example, you have a tram network, you can also use the electric substations, of course, and your workforce, which is trained to work with electricity. You can use that to support in-motion charging buses. So that's when really it gets interesting, is if you can combine your knowledge and your efficiency of an infrastructure you already have in place. So we developed, for a knowledge brief that we published at UITP very recently, we developed some graphics. If you don't mind looking at the upper part of the picture, you've got the standard electric bus again that has its charging station, and then maybe runs 10 kilometers on a battery mode and has to charge again. And then where do you have the in motion charging trolley bus, which, for example, can run 3 kilometers under wire and then 7 kilometers off wire with very, very light batteries. So you've got a shorter running time of batteries, you need less charging power, and you can transport more passengers in a more sustainable way. So this is why we also call these in-motion chargers infinite range e-buses, which is also a way to call them, because as I said before, they can basically run 24 hours. And unlike battery buses, they like the heat and the cold. What you see on the right is the number 5 bus headed for the UBC, for the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada. And even if it's got -20 or -30 degrees or 4 degrees of heat, as they had this heat wave, you probably remember that 2 months ago in Canada, the trolley buses work and work and work. Battery buses with +40 outside or -30, best of luck getting your system up and running. By the way, there was in Nantes in France, they had a series of Irisar BRT battery buses that wintered in January in the cold for 3 days. They had to stop the whole operation because none of the buses worked anymore. So don't only believe what the coach builders tell you that want to sell you the vehicles, but really run your analysis and ask the technical expert, ask some neutral consultants that will tell you what fits where. So that was something that we did for the North American market. You see that Gillick and New Flyer, which are basically the main coach builders in North America and based in the United States, New Flyer being part of Daimler buses, as you know. They serve Dayton. They have vehicles in Dayton, Ohio, and Vancouver, Canada, and San Francisco, to just name the major markets. And all those are IMC. We've got for example, in Parma, in Italy, we've got the new Solaris Torino 12, which is also very modern IMC bus. In Solingen, they just ordered the Solaris Torino 18, which is the articulated version, which is also all fully IMC capable, so with a small battery. Then we have Cagliari in Sardinia. We've got the example from Montreux with the new Van Hol Exquisity 18. And what you saw in the first picture on the bridge, the Exquisity 24 in Linz, which is also a superb vehicle and runs very, very smoothly. I've seen it myself 2 years ago. So you've got these IMC buses available in all kinds of lengths, and you can really combine all the classical factors of bus building with each other. But the bigger the vehicle, the more advantage you have from the IMC capacities. So that is a little bit, I'm not going into details. This is data we got from San Francisco, where they showed that the mean time between failures, and this is an operational stability thing, or also, I mean, a political thing, can be politically very sensitive. The mean time between failures when your vehicle would need repairs, the trolley and IMC bus performs way better than the diesel bus. And this is, especially in North America, is one of the metrics that are applied when you purchase vehicles or when you make system choices. So that, and as again, I'm not going into the details, but that can be politically very important and technically also. Historically, you know where the word trolley bus come from. It is just a flashback. It's Jason Trolley that invented that, basically with this little cart that you see there, and that was a little vehicle that followed the overhead lines in 1882. By the way, the same year that a tram operation was introduced in Zurich, just for my friends from the Tram Museum. It's nice, something nice to realize. So that is just a historical perspective. Now again, let's look again at that energy demand thing. If you look at the energy demand thing for opportunity for overnight charging, which is on the very left, you see that you've got, if you multiply power and time, you see that you've got a lot of power demand in a very short time overnight. It's already more distributed for the opportunity charging, and it's very, very equitable for the in-motion charging, which again, I said that before, if it's about grid power, grid stabilization, that can be a huge asset if you have a technology like that. Also, you see that the times that you can run on that energy, you see the graphs below. You see that the in-motion charging allows you an enormous amount of operation, or even an infinite operation. So it's really very, very efficient. I'll go past that. This is a picture which is from Solingen. Also there, no big infrastructure anymore, no overhead wires, no spider webs. In Solingen, if the buses are kept at the depot, you just need one pair of wires, and that basically supplies the whole fleet, you know, to cool them or heat them in winter, so that when they leave the depot, they are already ready for passengers. It allows you to work with very, very light assets, which is really a big efficiency. Also, if we talk about infrastructure investments or depot modifications. Now, what I said before is that particularly important application for in-motion charging is high and ultra high capacity corridors, which is, for example, bus rapid transit and EBRTs. What you have traditionally is on the upper picture, you've got an EBRT with overhead wires in the middle, like what they did in Quito in Ecuador. And you've got the feeder routes with diesel buses, or you've got the diesel buses also running under overhead wires, which is something very frequent. And now with the in-motion charging, you could switch to what we see below. All the buses are electric, and even the buses that continue beyond the BRT corridor can run fully electric and then go back to the corridor and recharge while they're under the corridor. So that brings me to the main point, and we're developing a tool, an electronic calculating tool based on GIS data for that. If you have your data of your network, you can calculate with computers, you can calculate today where you need to put the wires to basically put 80 or 90% of your... You there? Is that okay? Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me? Okay, there was an echo, sorry. You can basically use those... Hello? Martin, könnt ihr mich hören? Can you hear me? Okay, good. Okay, sorry, I had an echo. Okay, basically what you can do is you can have all the 80 or 90% of your routes, you can feed them and switch them to electric propulsion with just a few wires in the right places. So that's a mathematical optimization problem with multiple variables, but that's something very, very interesting to do, and that we are developing a tool currently to come up with that in cities. I hope that will be ready next year. So that is really a lot of opportunities that you get there. Now let me see, I'm trying to switch to transparency. Another advantage, if you have an onboard charger on the IMC buses to charge that little battery. For the current electric buses, the flash chargers and the depot chargers, you have a lot of different protocols that are out there, CCS, CHA demo, GBT. There are lots of different protocols that basically govern the communication between the charging station and the vehicle. And generally it goes via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. And with the in-motion charging trolleybus, you need one of that. And the problem that you have with the current e-buses, with the flash chargers, you have the problem that you have a vendor, what we call a vendor lock-in. So you buy one system, and then you have to, all your buses have to work with that system. So in the future, if you buy Volvo buses or VDL buses, you probably have to buy these again because they follow that protocol. Which can be very difficult in terms of purchasing. Whereas for the in-motion charging trolleybus, you can basically buy any vehicle. It's a limited market, but there are quite 5 or 6 vendors in the world, and you're not locked in to one specific protocol. So that is also something that is very important. I'll jump on the rest. This is something we had already. For the rewiring, and I'll come to that later, we'll look at an example from China. What you have on the left is a picture that I made in Shanghai in December 2019, just a few months before the world closed down. And you see that is a moment on the left picture, you see that that is one of these places where after a section with no wires, the wire resumes. And that bus is just in the process of rewiring, so the poles go back up. And I was using, this was not made with a smartphone, it was made with a professional camera. And still you see that it goes so quickly. It takes 2.5 seconds in Shanghai, the norm being up to 5. It goes so quickly that it goes automatically during the passenger exchange. So there's no waiting time. There's no loss of efficiency in having your vehicle circulate. And that is really the point. And on the right-hand side, it's a picture which you see from Switzerland's last overland trolleybus route, which follows section Villeneuve-Chillon route, where you see in the back is the Chillon Castle. And you see that the funnel for the little funnels for rewiring, it's transparent. It's made of plexiglass. So you basically don't see it. So it's really it's really very adapted to an urban setting. It's not something gross that you have there. It's almost invisible. So you can really do lots of things, and you can do a lot of things also to either use the wires as an urban design element or to hide them. So this is something we had already. I already was talking about the synergies with rail applications, where if you have rail substations, you can use them to feed trolleybuses. And sorry, it's a little bit low here. Best practices, yeah. Successful implementations around the world. Let me show you some examples. San Francisco today, they just switched from the Skoda buses to the new Flyer buses. They have got today 278 IMC trolleybuses that climb up to 23%, not 23 per mil, 23%, San Francisco being San Francisco. So it's an extremely steep gradient, and these vehicles do that robustly and carry the passengers with no problems at all. Seattle in Washington has 174 IMC buses, which are fully fueled by green hydropower, and the same is in Vancouver. You probably know that the Transit Authority in Vancouver, which used to be called BC Transit and is now TransLink, and is a super agency managing the roads, managing the buses, managing the SkyTrain, managing the commuter railroads. They manage everything, and they own the hydropower stations. As a province of British Columbia owns the hydropower stations in the mountains, and also there the Vancouver trolleybuses run on 100% water power, so really clean energies. And they've got 262 IMC buses, which is a huge fleet also, both articulated and standard buses. Sorry, the slides are a little bit slow. I'm trying to. Sorry. Well, we've got Dayton, Ohio, which is one of the smaller systems, which also has 45 new buses that they got in the past years. So, and they quite love them. And this is the XXXL, the EBRT in Linz, Austria, which was manufactured by Van Hool. And it's a bus that could also very well run on systems all across the world. So just as an example of what you can do, it's really very beautiful vehicles. Now there are new applications, and this is where I'm coming back to Italy. Rimini is introducing and is currently trialing a new BRT line on a protected lane with new trolleybuses. Pescara is also in the process of doing that. It got delayed by the pandemic. And is this the picture that you see on the lower right? Look at this super beautiful catenary, designer catenary carriers. This is something, sorry if I say that, I've got such an admiration for Italian design. Only Italy can do this. This circle with the support, it's super elegant. There's nothing gross about it. It doesn't look industrial. It's an urban design element. This is really only Italy can do this. This is really fantastic. So, I mean, there's lots of opportunities, and don't get, if people tell you, oh, we need this overhead wires, no, make it a design element, make people proud of it. So I know there's a controversy a little bit also in Pescara, I'm aware of that, but still there's lots of opportunities to do that in a nice way. And then I want to jump to Prague, which basically ended its trolleybus service in 1972, but restarted with tests in 2017. And in 2022, will introduce a new line to the airport. You know probably that in Prague, the metro is not serving the airport. So at the moment, they have a bus line where you've got an articulated bus every 90 or 120 seconds. at peak time. So every 90 or 120 seconds, an articulated bus. And now they calculated the profile, and they need just on 23% of the route, if they convert it to IMC, they need wires just where it goes across a hill. And then they can serve the whole route with 20 double articulated battery trolley buses with IMC and more vehicles to come. So that will open in 2022 and will be really a game changer for the airport transportation in Prague. And the nice thing is that it's very quickly to install because you just need the overhead wires, the power supply already, they can take that from the metro. And then if later at some point the metro gets extended to the airport, you don't have a double rail infrastructure or something, you can dismantle the trolley bus lines and put them elsewhere. So that's really very, very useful and opens up of lots of possibilities. You're probably aware that Berlin is going to build a new trolley bus network in Spandau, in the western part of the city, which will also be served by double articulated buses. Another German town which also has a route which climbs a hill and is a high capacity route, Marburg. They will also reintroduce trolley buses. And then India, Nashik, is developing a sort of an alternative to a metro system where with mechanical guidance, sort of what we have in the busways in UK or the O-Bahn in Adelaide, with mechanical guidance, they will have an IMC trolley bus system running on a bridge, on viaducts, and then going off the viaducts and serving the city. And they want to develop that into an intermediate capacity transport for lots of Indian cities. It's a railway ministry in Italy that in India that is involved in that. And I'm involved as a consultant a little bit. We're doing that together with AECOM. So there's lots of things going on really globally because it's such a good, comparably cheap and quick to implement technology. I'll come back to Shanghai. As I already mentioned before, the big Chinese cities are massively investing in trolley buses now. And don't get fooled. China brands itself globally as a battery bus country, but that's basically because BYD, the manufacturer, is in the province of Guangzhou. And in China, the economic system is such that the operators locally and the manufacturers are often very close to each other. And my friend Joe, who's the vice head of Shenzhen Bus, he is one of the global ambassadors for Zhou for selling battery buses all across the world. But what he doesn't tell people is that Beijing and Shanghai are now massively investing in trolley buses for their high capacity corridors. I'll come to that later and show you some pictures. That is a picture from Beijing. It's wrong, they put Shanghai, but it's a picture from Beijing. So you really see that these in-motion charging trolley buses of the latest generation, they have nothing to do with the traditional boxes on wheels that we know. And China is very good also at supplementing those modes. So basically the cities get 3 different modes. They get the depot charger bus for low frequency and for low frequency routes. They got the flash charging buses for intermediate frequency, and then the bus rapid transit, the high capacity routes are served by in-motion charging, articulated or double articulated trolley buses. I already told you all of that there. Here are some pictures again from Linz, from San Francisco in the middle, as you see by the iconic building in the back. So again, let me, as a summary at this point, where is the main potential for IMC? What are the low-hanging fruits? Well, if they are it's best suited to cities and territories with the following properties: either very hot or very cold climate, or both, like Moscow or Vancouver, or something like that. We've got large fleets, where you've got large fleets, because that would be very difficult to charge overnight for the depots. Where you've got EBRTs with high demand, high capacity, high volume corridors, or if you want to build a kind of pre-metro intermediate capacity transit function, where you've got major sections of overlapping routes and network, I already said that, and significant gradients and long daily mileage. And or where you've already got wires or carrying structures in place, which makes it much cheaper to either build or maintain an overhead wire sections, or where you already have light rail with a 600 or 700 volt rail system with the power supplies and the substations already in place, which can very easily be converted to also feed your in motion charging trolley buses on the side. Okay, I'm moving on. Just a second, I'm having a slow reaction here. It's not reacting. I need to wait a moment. Sorry. Let's see. Here. Okay. So that was for the UITP slides. Now I'll continue, as I said, with some pictures that I made in China just before Christmas on the 23rd of December in 2019. Again, just 2 months before the world closed down, when I was there on the way back from Cambodia, where I was running a project for the United Nations, and I was traveling and through Shanghai on the way back, and used the opportunity of a couple of hours of layover to make a few pictures of this trolley bus route. So this is the line 71, the route 71, that was built in Shanghai on the major corridor and was put new in service in 2017. And the reason I'm choosing you to show you that is to show you how elaborate it is really built and how much design consideration went into it. So it's a BRT where you've got, in peak times, you've got a vehicle every 60 seconds. You've got both single and double and articulated vehicles that are serving that route, and it basically follows a major road artery where previously there were several bus lines that were totally submerged because they couldn't meet up with the demand. So what you have here is some vehicles in the depot. The vehicles were all built by Yutong, by the Chinese bus maker. So here you see one of the 12-meter vehicles. It's very interesting. It's typically for China that you've got both the doors in the middle, and Chinese BRT systems very often still use conductors for ticket validation, despite all the technology being in place. That's among the controversies and the interesting things in China. You've got the smartest technology. Try to pay somewhere in cash without having a smartphone. It will be difficult to pay some fruit on the market with cash. But then again, on the bus you have a conductor. But here again is a view of the entrance of the depot on one of the ends of the route. So this is where the buses are basically put into service. You see the little funnel that captures the poles when they rewire. And that is where the route starts and where passengers, which is the first stop where passengers can board the vehicles. Here's again a close-up vision of the funnel where the buses enter the overhead sections. You see here that's at the terminus, one of the vehicles, Route 71, headed for Yan'an Road, and you see the conductor already waiting for passengers to board. What is very interesting on the sections is that it's really like a metro with fare gates, so that open, and the fare gates they coincide with the doors on the buses so it's really with platform screen doors with PSDs. Here you see a detail of the entrance. It's low flat, so it's really according to the reals to the latest standards, the way it was built. At the part of the route, it follows a motorway. It goes under a motorway, under an urban freeway, basically. And that was a very economic way to build the catenary, because you could use the poles that carry the road bridge that was already in place. And you see that the stations really have a branding. They're very elaborate. It's like a light rail station, basically, what they built there. You see with the platform screen doors, and they built the steered stations. As always in China, they made them much longer than what they need actually, so that for future capacity increases, the stations are already in place. And in the segment like this one here, you just need to add the platform doors. Again, here you see it's one of the sections where after a section with no overhead wires, at the stop, when the vehicle stops, it can reconnect automatically to the overhead lines with the connection funnel in place. So that is part of the photo I already showed you before. The vehicle comes on battery on the left. It comes on battery traction. It stops where the wires start again, and in 2 seconds, the rewiring takes place while the passengers board or unboard the vehicle. And then you've got China being China. You've got all sorts of animations. So it's this cartoonification, how we call it, where everything that is instructive to people is shown in cartoons. So you've got also accounts of passenger information. It shows you with the little buses on the lower right corner. It shows you whether the vehicle, what the passenger load is, what kind of passenger load is expected, and you see that also in the English translation. It's called an intermediate capacity transit. In the bit clumsy Chinese English, it's called medium volume number 71 bus. So that's really displays a little bit. It sums up what I said before. So that's the interior of the vehicles with the. So you see the basically the fare validator that where you can tap your mobile phone, and you see also the seat for the conductor, where the conductor can also sit there if he or she is sitting there and sell you a ticket, and in front on the left you've got the driver. So that is a view from the driver on the specific corridor. So you see that at what distance the buses follow each other. It's all the same route. So you see that the vehicles really, they follow each other sometimes down to 30 seconds. So the computer calculates, and the forecast of the passenger volume decides at what frequency the vehicles follow each other. So here you see them on a section without catenary. They drive and they run on battery power, because simply, for example, with the crossroads, you see China's roads are enormous. So with the width of the road, it would be very difficult to put the wires in place there. You would need to put holding structures in place. No, you don't need that anymore. The vehicles run on battery in the sections where it's difficult to put the wire and rewire afterwards. So here you see a detail. Observe also that on the corridor, on the road, on the tarmac, it's written Route 71, reserved corridor, midnight to 24 hours. So that tells other motorists that this is a corridor that's reserved 24/7. It's a right of way only for the trolleybus. And anybody who would drive on there with his private car, China being China, gets, of course, photographed, face recognized, and then you get a bad social credit point. So you shouldn't do that. So here again, some to give you an impression of how wide really those roads and those crossroads are. And here you see that the vehicle before in front just rewired and has its poles up again on a section where it goes under wire. Also observe how nicely the stops are made, and with all the information displays that are there, and the really designed, very well designed shades for the passengers. They really applied they really put a lot of care into that. What you see under that red little hut there on the left is the TVM. It's a ticket vending machine that is in there. So it's really a very flexible thing. Here's a detail of the overhead wire. It's basically a copy of the Kumla and Matter system that we use in Switzerland also. Here you get another detail of the platform screen doors, and it's 100% accessible. You see the tactile elements on the floor for the visually challenged, so that they can follow their way and find their way into the bus without falling. And it's really a model example of how you can do it. China is very, very strong on that. Another view of the design elements, how nicely it's made. Again, the other direction, so that this is a stop which is taken apart. So the two directions are served by different stops on different sections on different sides of the crossroads. Here are some more impressions. I'm just taking you through the pictures for you to get an impression of how it looks. You might want to see that there's a special traffic light on the left in the middle, the yellow one, and you see that the traffic light is a little trolleybus symbol actually, which says that which demonstrates that this is only for the number 71 bus. So here you see the problem in China, the huge traffic jams that was in the rush hour. You see by the color of the sky. I really had to hurry because night falls very quickly in China around 6:30 p.m. And you see the taxis and the cars sitting there, and you see the bus that moves on its own right of way because its corridor is protected, and thus is very efficient for carrying people. Here's another section with overhead wires in a zoom shot, so you see that it's really a very long route. Here again, you see the green light for the trolleybus and the cars being banned from another road traffic sign that bans the cars from entering the corridor. And on the other side of the road, you see the Porsche Cayenne that a lot of people crave for. So here's the typical, here's a red light for the trolleybus, and this typical Chinese countdown counter that you also have there, as you have on all pedestrian and road traffic stops, where the generally traffic lines have this countdown, and that's standard in China. And here it switches to green, and off we go. So again, that's under the road bridge. I'm getting you through the pictures. It was very difficult to make those photos, so bear with me if they're not all perfect, but I think it gets you a good impression of what the situation is. And that is very interesting. Here you see a part where the oncoming bus runs on battery, and on the right-hand side, the other direction is under wires. So you can mix that depending on where you go. That is a picture that we had already where the refunneling is. And this is just before the stop, big crossroads again, an intersection of two major arteries, and there are no wires. The buses just cross the corridor and will wire afterwards at the next stop. And you see already that you see 3 buses of the Route 71 in the picture, one heading towards the left and 2 coming towards us. So that also gives you an idea of what the capacity that is being served looks like. Now for an outlook, I'll tell you a few other international developments. Again, the reason for all this is that we want to get rid of the cars. And this is a photo I made from the SkyTrain in Vancouver 2 years ago, which is really illustrating very well what I believe should happen to the cars. So what is the opportunity, just as a lookout of IMC? We can take down those spider webs. This is a picture I made in Vancouver, Canada in 2019. So you see, really, this is what people don't like about the classic trolleybus. And that is what makes it politically difficult, exactly those things. And it's not only the politics, it's also the maintenance costs. Getting that, keeping that up and in shape, you know, and the switches, and then in winter, and the de-icing. All these things can go now. We might like them as amateurs because it's beautiful. I also personally like it as an engineer. That's the engineer in me. But let's face it, politically, that ruins, or did ruin up to now, a little bit the reputation of the trolleybus. So these things, they can go. This is something we don't need anymore. That's the economic and political factors that we need to consider. And the picture I really like to show is this picture that I made 2 years ago in Bern. Which is, for those that don't know, Bern, the capital of Switzerland. It's a UNESCO, the whole old town of Bern is a UNESCO heritage protected site. So that is really something where you want to be very, very careful with infrastructure. No, don't let you tell anybody that trolleybus wires do not belong in historic contexts. You don't see them. And if even in an open space like here, you know, they are barely visible. And this is a corridor. We've got two trolleybus roads and tram lines. So it's really a lot of infrastructure. But if you put it in the right place, and if you attach it to the buildings, it's so reduced and so fine, because you don't need the overhead catenaries. You just need the wires, which dynamically is possible up to 70 kilometers an hour. Beyond that, you need categories, but that's what the speeds that the trolleybus uses, especially in an urban setting. So you get away with that very well. Here's another picture where you almost don't see the wires. That is in Vancouver, one of the major crossings at West Georgia Street and Granville Street, in really the heart of downtown Vancouver, Canada. Then you can automate and accelerate. And that's a picture I made at night in China. And that is one of the traditional legacy systems that is there in Beijing, the traditional part. Now you can see here, I'm going back and forth. You see the bus that rewires. It really takes seconds. And sometimes in China, the buses, these funnels are in the middle of the road. So the bus stops in the middle of the road, rewires, and off it goes. Focus on high capacity corridors. This is exactly where the in-motion charging trolleybus belongs, where several of the routes overlap. That's where you need to put the wires, because all the buses can follow each other. They can also overtake each other, but they can follow each other, and all can use the wires to recharge. You don't need individual chargers or vehicles waiting to recharge like you would for opportunity charges. And then you want to insert the whole thing into an urban realm. This is a photo from Schaffhausen, one of the smallest systems, which just got one trolleybus route in northwestern Switzerland. where even you see it serves a residential quarter, and even there, these lines are not really disturbing and visible. Here's another picture from Vancouver where you see them for once because the reflections of the sun. That's again a number 5 route. And then simplify and extend. Again, this is a picture from Zurich, the Spiriplatz. Those very quite heavy constructions, like for curves and for switches, that is something in the future that can go. And that is then you can bring the costs of the wiring where we calculate with about $1 million US or Swiss francs per mile in costs for the overhead wire if it's initial setup. You can bring that down to half if you don't need the curves, the switches, and the intersections anymore. And finally, again, that is the old San Francisco model, the Skoda trolley bus. And that is not photoshopped. I mean, you really see those 23% gradients. Diesel buses cannot do that, you know. And do you want to kind of have a battery bus go up there with 4 tons of batteries? Well, I mean, you can get the bus up, but then you have to leave the passengers at the stop. So that is really the opportunities of the things. Another picture from Schaffhausen, where you see how much even an articulated bus can follow through a small route. Then, of course, you can use that for BRT corridors, turn it into intermediate capacity transit. The World Bank Group is now very heavily promoting the IMC trolleybus. This is a picture of the latest vehicle generation from Zurich, which is a double articulated bus, which basically has a BRT function. This is what came with the invite. The double articulated bus from St. Gallen that very recently also decided to expand its trolleybus network. And this is a picture of where it is missing. For those of you that have ever been to Istanbul, they've got this BRT corridor that's called Metrobus, where at peak times they have one bus, an articulated bus, and these are these Mercedes Citaro version with the double axle on the trailer. One bus every 14 seconds. And the stops are very long for buses to overtake themselves so that one bus the buses can stop with each other. If not, all of you know that 14 seconds of a headway, you can do that without having very long stops. And now imagine if they put that under wire, what they could serve in terms of gasoline. I think it's all 35 or 40 kilometers long. I used to have my hotel at the end of the route, so I used that quite extensively when I was at Istanbul for a conference a couple of years ago. So, I mean, there's lots of opportunities really, and this is exactly the application that IMC would be suited for. Now let's close with an example of how not to do it. Wellington, New Zealand had the only trolleybus system in the Pacific. Wellington is a very hilly place, and they closed that system in 2017 because there was a political controversy. Then they were promised in Wellington that they would get some kind of miracle technology, and the trolleybuses that were only 8 years old at that time, that they would be converted into battery electric buses with basically some kind of gas generator. So that was called ride speed technology, which of course was totally experimental and failed spectacularly. And now they have secondhand Euro 3 diesel buses from Auckland that they brought in. So they even had a former tram tunnel that was served by the trolley buses. But this technology, this is the gas turbine coupled to a generator that would fuel the batteries. This is the experimental trolleybus, the first one that they converted. It didn't work out at all. So basically the project was abandoned. And now Wellington is there without an electric bus system. Basically, they are trying to kind of buy Alexander Dennis double-decker buses, but again, with the steep hilly gradients, it's not an easy thing to do. And I think a lot of people in Wellington, especially in New Zealand, that wants to profile itself as a green nation, there's a lot of people by now that are regretting that closure. There's a webpage that you can find. It's called Revolt Wellington, where people even try to reintroduce the trolley buses. But I think that's a little bit utopic, but it could have been done. And finally, as a last outlook, let's talk a little bit about the cargo section. Also, there's this tendency also that heavy trucks should get electrified by overhead wires, because you've got basically the exactly same consideration with batteries, the opportunities and the threats. And the Stadtwerke Solingen, the municipal bus operator of Solingen, published this in the newspaper ad when Daimler and the consortium in Germany over the motorway, the freeway A5, they introduced a test section to electrify the trucks. They put this there and said that this is the original and this is the falsification, which of course is a funny joke that they made. But this is, they call it, Siemens developed this system, which is an e-highway. Unfortunately, they are building that for a top speed of 90 kilometers per hour. So they need the full railway style catenary because of the dynamic effects on the wire at 90 kilometers per hour. Up to 70 kilometers per hour, you could use the much smaller, lighter, and easier to build trolleybus wire. So I'm asking myself, does it really make sense for this extra speed to have this much more massive infrastructure, but Germany being Germany, try to talk to them. So that is the point, but it certainly is a very interesting approach. Again, following this philosophy of in-motion charging, of providing energy to the vehicle externally, and not doing everything on batteries only. Here's just for the legacy, the system in Quito, Ecuador, which is a legacy BRT system, and one of the trolleybuses in Latin America. It was opened in 1995 and carries a stunning 270,000 boardings a day on one single trolleybus route. So that is really an example in Latin America of how to do it. Unfortunately, now lots of diesel buses run on this system at the present stage because they are having trouble of investing in new trolleybuses, but some of these Mercedes buses have, I think, have mileage of something like 2 million miles on them or something. So it's really very, very sustainable. Finally, also, you can do that at a large scale. These are these mining trucks that have tremendous power consumption. I mean, if you put a human beside that, you see maybe the little driver in the cabin. The height of the lower part of the tire is about the size of a person. So if you really need torque and high power to set the vehicle in motion, and you need continuous power, again, external energy supply to the vehicle is the thing you want to have. That is the same kind of technology using trolleybus technology versus pantograph. So that also exists, again, with the advantage of a simpler catenary system. This is an example from Italy, again, in the Alps. Where you had I think it was in the Dolomites, where you had an element in the logistics chain, also trolley trucks. Exactly, thank you. In Bergamo, right? And then there's again a picture from this test section on the A5 highway in Germany. If ever you drive your car between Freiburg and Breisgau and Frankfurt, you will go underneath it, and you will see that section. So they are experimenting with that. There are also Daimler did also a trial in the past of Los Angeles in the US with Freightliner, which is the US truck division. So there's lots of things going there on also in the track field. Okay, that is a lot of material, lots of information. Thanks a lot for your patience. It was a big go through, and I'm very much happy to take your questions again. Thank you very much for your patience.